For years, Emilio Estevez seemed to vanish from the spotlight, and Hollywood quietly let the question linger. What really happened to one of the most recognizable faces of the 1980s? At his peak, Estevez was everywhere. He was the rebellious heartbeat of a generation, a member of the legendary Brat Pack, and a box office draw whose name alone could sell tickets. Then, almost without warning, the offer slowed, the headlines faded, and Emilio stepped back while his peers surged ahead. To fans, it felt like a mystery wrapped in silence, but this wasn't a story of scandal, addiction, or career collapse the way many assumed. Behind the scenes, Emilio was making deliberate choices that ran against Hollywood's expectations. He walked away from fame when it demanded more than he was willing to give, choosing creative control over celebrity, privacy over constant exposure. While others chased bigger paychecks and louder roles, he turned inward, writing, directing, and telling stories that mattered to him. Even if they didn't dominate the box office, his absence only fueled rumors. Some claimed he was overshadowed by his famous family. Others insisted he was pushed out by a changing industry. The truth is far more complex and far more human. Emilio Estevez didn't disappear. He stepped away on his own terms, and the real reasons reveal a side of Hollywood most stars are too afraid to admit. He was never supposed to fade. Emilio Estevez entered Hollywood with a face audiences trusted and a presence that felt effortless. In the early 1980s, his name carried weight, raw, youthful, electric. Films like The Outsiders, The Breakfast Club, and St. Elmo's Fire didn't just make him famous. They locked him into the cultural memory of an entire generation. He wasn't chasing attention back then. Attention chased him. Studios saw a leading man. Fans saw authenticity. Critics saw potential that could last decades. Yet even at the height of that fame, Emilio felt something was off. While others around him leaned into excess and image building, he grew uneasy with the machinery behind stardom. Hollywood wanted him loud, marketable, constantly visible. Emilio wanted something quieter, control over his work, space to think, freedom to fail without it becoming a headline. The more successful he became, the more boxed in he felt. Fame wasn't intoxicating to him. It was suffocating. Unlike many of his peers, he didn't cling to the Brat Pack label. In fact, he resisted it. Emilio avoided the party circuit, dodged gossip columns, and stayed far from the chaos that swallowed so many young stars of that era. He watched careers burn out fast, watched personal lives unravel under the pressure of being endlessly available. And he made a decision few people understood at the time. He would not let Hollywood decide who he became. When his last name came up, assumptions followed. People thought doors were opening for him because he was Martin Sheen's son. What they ignored was how hard Emilio worked to separate himself from that shadow. He even chose not to use the Sheen name, knowing it would cost him roles and recognition. That choice wasn't accidental. It was a statement. He wanted to earn his place, not inherit it. And if that meant fewer opportunities, he accepted the price. As the industry shifted in the 1990s, the kinds of roles Emilio was offered began to change. Big studios wanted spectacle and formula. He wanted stories with heart, with flaws, with consequences. Instead of fighting the tide, he stepped sideways. He moved behind the camera, writing and directing projects that didn't scream for attention but demanded honesty. These films didn't always make noise, but they mattered deeply to him. For Emilio, success was no longer measured in box office numbers. It was measured in integrity. To the public, his absence looked like decline. Rumors filled the silence. Some said he couldn't compete anymore. Others claimed he was eclipsed by flashier stars, even by his own family. But the truth was simpler and far more uncomfortable for Hollywood to admit. Emilio Estevez walked away before the industry could reshape him into something he didn't recognize. He chose privacy in an era addicted to exposure. He chose long-term fulfillment over short-term fame. While audiences stopped seeing him everywhere, he was still working just out of sight, exactly where he wanted to be. And that choice, made quietly and without apology, would define the rest of his career in ways most people never realized. Stepping behind the camera wasn't just a career pivot for Emilio, it was a necessity. Acting in Hollywood felt like answering someone else's questions all the time. Directing and writing let him ask his own. He could explore themes that mattered: family, identity, morality, and the quiet battles people fought without anyone noticing. Films like Bobby and the Way weren't flashy. They weren't designed to dominate awards shows or tabloids. They were personal statements, stories that reflected the man he had become. Stories that could only exist if he stayed true to himself, even if it meant obscurity. For Emilio, this path was a revelation. The industry was built on visibility and connections, yet he found freedom in invisibility. He could work at his own pace, with actors and crew who shared his vision, without the constant pressure of being on for the public. In interviews, he remained measured, careful with words, always redirecting attention to the work itself rather than the man behind it. Fans who sought him out online were rewarded with insights into the projects themselves, not gossip. Emilio had become a storyteller first and a celebrity second, a deliberate inversion that few understood at the time. Even so, stepping away from fame wasn't without cost. He watched some of his peers, Tom Cruise, Rob Lowe, Charlie Sheen, build empires on their names alone. Opportunities for blockbuster roles came and went. Some offers were tempting, others absurd. But Emilio's instinct never wavered. He refused scripts that didn't resonate, refused characters that felt like caricatures, refused the Hollywood treadmill. For him, acting wasn't a commodity, it was a craft. And craft demanded patience, reflection, and a willingness to say no, even when the world expected yes. Family ties, once assumed to be a lifeline, became both a support and a weight. Martin Sheen had forged a legacy of strong roles and public engagement, yet Emilio intentionally carved his own path. He wasn't rebelling against his father, but he was asserting a philosophy. Fame was not the goal, art was. Even as his siblings, Charlie Sheen in particular, remained constantly in the headlines, Emilio remained a study in restraint. Hollywood couldn't manufacture the respect he wanted. He had to earn it quietly. The result? A career that confounded many outsiders. Critics and fans debated whether he had fallen off the map, but Emilio knew the truth. He had never left. He was still acting, still directing, still creating, but on his terms. The silence surrounding his name was a shield, protecting the very thing that Hollywood often overlooked, the artist's autonomy. In a world obsessed with image, Emilio Estevez had chosen substance. By the early 2000s, this approach bore fruit in unexpected ways. His films, though not blockbusters, gained recognition for authenticity. Audiences who discovered his work appreciated its honesty and heart. Yet Emilio remained cautious about fame creeping back in. Interviews were rare, public appearances minimal, and social media a tool for projects, not personal branding. It was a lifestyle that allowed him to maintain the balance he valued so deeply, to be both visible and invisible. Known and unknown, Emilio Estevez's story wasn't one of decline, scandal, or disappearance. It was one of conscious choice, of redefining what success meant in an industry that rarely rewarded such restraint. And, while the world speculated, he quietly continued the work that mattered, proving that sometimes walking away from the spotlight is the most powerful move of all. By the mid-2000s. Emilio Estevez had firmly established himself as a Hollywood outsider by choice. While his peers chased franchises, red carpets, and tabloid headlines, he focused on projects that spoke to his values. He became a director of subtle yet impactful stories, exploring human fragility, moral dilemmas, and the invisible threads that connect people. The Way wasn't just a film. It was a meditation on life, loss, and the courage to follow one's own path. It was the kind of work that mainstream Hollywood rarely funded, but for Emilio, it was the work that mattered most. Choosing this route meant sacrificing mainstream recognition. The media rarely covered his films extensively, and audiences sometimes overlooked them entirely. Yet this invisibility became a strategic advantage. Emilio could experiment, fail, and refine without the crushing scrutiny that comes with celebrity. Where other stars felt pressure to constantly project a persona, he remained free. He was no longer Emilio Estevez, the Brat Pack heartthrob. He was simply a filmmaker, a storyteller, a creator of worlds he wanted to inhabit. And that, for him, was far more fulfilling than any award or headline. Interestingly, his retreat from acting in blockbuster films created a mystique that only fueled curiosity. People wondered why someone with such talent wasn't everywhere. Rumors abounded. Was he disillusioned with Hollywood? Was he overshadowed by family fame? Was he simply washed up? The reality was far simpler. Emilio Estevez had rewritten the rules for himself. Fame was optional. Autonomy was essential. While others chased the fleeting highs of public attention, he pursued the enduring satisfaction of craft. Even family dynamics played into this narrative. As Charlie Sheen dominated tabloid pages and Martin Sheen continued his political and acting engagements, Emilio's choice to step back created a contrast that was impossible to ignore. It was as though he wanted to prove that a life in Hollywood didn't have to follow the script dictated by others. He could exist outside the glare and still thrive creatively. That was his quiet rebellion, and it spoke volumes about his character. Yet, despite his careful avoidance of celebrity culture, Emilio never abandoned acting entirely. Roles came selectively, often in independent films or projects that aligned with his values. He appeared when a character intrigued him or when a story resonated with his sensibilities. Each appearance reinforced a simple truth: Emilio Estevez was never missing. He was merely curating his presence, choosing when and where to show up, and always prioritizing substance over visibility. By this stage of his life, it became clear that his career trajectory was unconventional, yes, but deliberate. Emilio had mastered the art of balancing public curiosity with personal integrity. The questions about what happened faded when audiences began to understand the pattern. He had not disappeared. He had deliberately stepped aside. Hollywood might not have understood, but those who valued meaningful storytelling did. In the end, Emilio Estevez's journey reveals a different kind of Hollywood, success one not measured by billboards or box office numbers, but by authenticity, autonomy, and the courage to define a career on one's own terms. The truth is that the man behind the headlines never stopped creating. He just stopped following the rules that everyone else accepted without question. Even as Emilio Estevez maintained his deliberate distance from Hollywood's spotlight, his influence quietly persisted. Younger filmmakers and actors who admired his work often cited his films as models of integrity, proof that Hollywood didn't have to compromise art for fame. In interviews and panels, those who worked with him praised his dedication, humility, and vision. Unlike many stars who demand the spotlight, Emilio cultivated collaboration, ensuring every project reflected collective effort rather than personal ego. He also became more experimental, testing boundaries in both storytelling and production. Small, character-driven films allowed him to explore nuanced themes: grief, redemption, moral complexity. These weren't films designed for viral marketing or social media buzz. They were films that lingered in the mind long after the credits rolled. He prioritized emotional resonance over spectacle, believing that lasting impact came not from visibility, but from truth. His choices may have baffled the casual observer, but to those who valued craft, they were revolutionary. Family continued to play an intricate role in his story. Martin Sheen remained a towering presence in Hollywood and activism, while Charlie Sheen's fame and controversies dominated tabloids. Emilio could have leveraged their names for instant recognition, yet he rarely did. By avoiding the drama that ensnared his siblings, he maintained a clarity of purpose. This autonomy allowed him to define success on his own terms, a rare feat in an industry often obsessed with branding and buzz. His selective acting roles reflected a carefully cultivated ethos. He gravitated toward characters that challenged him and stories that resonated on a personal level. By the 2010s, he had developed a reputation for appearing only when he believed in the project's heart. Each role became an extension of his own philosophy, that art should illuminate the human experience, not merely entertain. Fans who had followed his journey came to understand that Emilio Estevez's seeming absence from mainstream media was a choice, not a decline. Behind the scenes, he also embraced mentorship, guiding younger filmmakers and actors toward authenticity. While the public might have thought he had vanished, his impact was quietly growing. The lessons he imparted about maintaining artistic integrity, navigating Hollywood on one's own terms, and resisting the lure of fleeting fame were shaping the next generation. In this way, Emilio Estevez's career became less about the roles he played and more about the ethos he embodied, a steadfast commitment to personal and artistic truth. Ultimately, Emilio Estevez's story isn't a cautionary tale about fading from fame. It's a testament to the power of deliberate choice. Hollywood didn't dictate his path. He did. He didn't vanish. He redefined what it means to succeed in an industry that often prizes visibility over substance. And in doing so, he reminded the world that true impact isn't measured by headlines or box office numbers, but by the courage to follow one's own convictions even when the world expects otherwise.